Hi, welcome to the second Paramahamsa Yogananda Talk on his birthday, January 5th, 2022. The topic I chose for the today's talk is understanding the consciousness and continuity in Indian history. How these two things are tied together, like understanding the consciousness might lead to continuity in Indian history, and at the same time, if we establish the continuity in Indian history, going back 5,000 years, that might lead to understanding the consciousness. And so, a little bit about me. My name is Karunakar Marsakatla. I'm a software engineer by profession, but I do research in science, basic science, and all its related branches. And going into the talk, um, ancient Indian rishis or ancient what they wrote in the ancient Indian texts talked about a lot of subjects. In one of them is astronomy, about the planetary movements at the short scale, short time span, and then kalpa, manvantara at the longer time spans in cycles, and Ayurveda is about the medicine. And then they did write about a lot of about the genealogy of the kings and the history going back, uh, at least definite history going back until the starting of the Kali Yuga, that is from the Mahabharata war, that spans about 5,000 years. And also they wrote about lot about consciousness and understanding about the mind and self. Um, so all these things they wrote about, but most of the things are definite, like astronomy, and then what the kalpa, manvantaras, and Ayurveda are well established. And then history, that's where the history and then consciousness, these two subjects needs to be explored further. What is consciousness? So consciousness can be defined as the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings, and that itself is like we can define in other ways as the self-realization. That is what gives the awareness to the this body. Without the self, the body is like lifeless, some lifeless entity, and that self, and that gives the awareness to the body. And what ancient rishis talked about is that this is not something you can understand by reading the books. This has to be realized one by experiencing within the body. So it's not like it's an understanding from an when somebody teaches you, you can't understand by just by the talk or reading the books. It has to be understood by changing yourself. And so this they established some rules to realize oneself is through yama and yamas, and anybody who is aware of Patanjali Yoga Sutras will know that what are yama and yamas, and one of the thing in there is telling the truth. So telling the truth all the time is one of those rules. And when they say telling the truth, they have whatever they are writing, whatever they are teaching, it has to be truth. Otherwise, they unnecessarily um, won't even convey to the others. Like they wrote about a lot of subjects, there is no truth in them. Like they won't even write it. So understanding the consciousness, the basic concept, one of the basic rules is always telling the truth. So and also this is that needs to be realized within the self, and then it's personal experience, then understanding of the brain. So when you look at the other subjects, what they wrote is the astronomy. They prepared very detailed calculations about the planets and all the celestial bodies, and also they even calculated the precision of the Earth's axis. That's it's somewhat in the longer time spans, and all these things are almost close to the what modern calculations are. And Kalpa Manvantaras are like in my earlier research, what I found that like Kalpa is the death and birth of the sun, so that cycle of the star with giving born again and dying in whatever the cycles of that star. So that is what is the kalpa is, and the manvantaras are within the kalpa, and the supercontinent cycles, the cycles where the continents disperse and then converge. So that is what is the manvantaras here. So they were able to determine, calculate the smaller time spans as well as the longer time spans. Mm, and then another subject is Ayurveda. That is very detailed description of the plants and then their medicinal uses. These things is still being used in today's environment, and and so those are the concepts ancients talked about, and they were always conveying the truth. If there is no truth in astronomical calculations, and then kalpas and manvantras in Ayurveda, whatever they were describing, if there is no truth, they won't even tell. So they also told about lot about consciousness, and then also about the Indian history, the genealogy of the kings, and going back to the 5,000 years. If there is no truth in those two as well, they won't even tell. But the reason they wrote about consciousness and as well as the history means there has to be truth in those two elements as well. And what the present understanding of the Indian history is like a Mahabharata war happened like somewhere around 1500 before Common Era, and then Buddha's period is around 600 BCE, and the Chandragupta Maurya is around 300 BCE. The contemporary Indian king to the Alexander time is they determined as the Chandragupta Maurya um, as 300 BCE. And then between those 1500 and 1600, 600, and then 300, so these are all they don't have any continuity. So they just established some dates, and then the periods between them they named it as the dark ages, because they couldn't able to determine what happened in those periods. But the ancient Indian rishis even wrote about the genealogies that spanning almost like 3,000 years from Kali Yuga to almost to the time of even for 3,000 years or even beyond. So what they mentioned is the Kali Yuga Mahabharata war happened around 3,100 before Common Era, and then time of Buddha was somewhere around 1800 BCE, and then time of Chandragupta or Ashoka, the Maurya dynasty, is around 1500 BCE, and then the person, the Chandragupta of the Gupta dynasty, was attributed to the contemporary Indian king to the Alexander time around BCE. So this misunderstanding between which Chandragupta was contemporary to the Alexander, that gave rise to all this confusion in Indian history, and a lot of researchers worked on them, and then now the evidence is building up to say that like the Chandragupta of Gupta dynasty was the Indian king that is contemporary to the Indian king. So why ancient texts are reliable? So why we have to take the the, the timeline given in the ancient text instead of the one what we have at the current understanding in the academic circles. So when we take the continuity in Indian. So there is Indian calendar that every year Atithis and all these things they calculate about like what is the auspicious day or what is the when to start, all those things. They pundits always prepare a calendar for going back almost 5,000 years, and each calendar will they mention which Kali Yuga the present year is. So we have 60-year cycle as also there in the Indian calendar, and then that gets repeated after every 60 years. So all these things they have been calculating continuously from 5,000 years. And when you look at the Mahabharata war, the astronomical positions given in this text has to be um, to the planetary positions around that time. Somebody, like if you attribute the text to 1500 BCE, and then when you look at the like even solar eclipses and then lunar eclipses were also described in the Mahabharata text, and a lot of researchers attribute that time scale to around 3100 BCE. So somebody who wrote around 1500 BCE a text, they can't give you planetary motions, planetary positions, even 1500 years before. That's kind of a forgery. You can assume, yeah, the current story. We can compare the Harry Potter series to whatever Mahabharata war and the current contemporary creation of literary work like in like 6 volumes. And imagine putting a time planetary positions when okay, Harry Potter going to the school or when he graduated, and give you planetary positions and then tell them that like attribute the times to like somewhere around 2000 years back, and giving the author preparing all the time planetary positions and everything and putting them in 2000 years back and attributing to that story is very difficult task. And the same way you can't just assume that Mahabharata text was written in 1500 BCE, but all the planetary positions and everything, solar eclipse and lunar eclipses were happening 1500 years even earlier that like 3000 years, 3000 year 100 BCE is very difficult thing. And so for those reasons we have to take that like Mahabharata text was written 3000 BCE, and continuity in ancient inscriptions. Not only that, and then we have a lot of inscriptions researchers were finding out, and these are all shows that like there is a continuity. Every inscription, stone inscription or copper plate inscriptions, they were giving the Kali Yuga era down the from almost like um, in between from 3000 year BCE to the even like couple of hundred years back, they keep writing mentioning the Kali Yuga. So that continuity there in history also. And so when you look at the when you take the Kali Yuga as start whatever the Mahabharata war started around 3000 years BCE, and then take all the genealogies, kings, the time periods of the kings and everything report given in that ancient text. When you calculate all those things, everything coming up matching with the whatever the time frames we have. So there is a continuity of kings rules, and then their times, and so there's a continuity from 3000 years to even 3000 year BCE to the present age. And and so that eliminates any periods of dark ages. So in the earlier case, when they shrank the time period to 1500 BCE, where they put the Mahabharata or 1500, so these genealogies and the time periods for the kings, they couldn't able to fit them together. So they eliminated all those genealogies and time frames given in the ancient text, and then reported them as the dark ages. There's nothing reliable sources there. So when you take the whole Indian history as depicted in the ancient texts and put the Mahabharata war 3000 years BCE, around 3100 BCE, then everything matches, and then there won't be any dark ages. So this establishes that unknown aspect of the Indian history as well. So now when you look at the astronomy, the planetary positions, and axis, the precision of the Earth's axis, that's very longer scale, like 26,000 years, and that turns out to be the true. And the Kalpa Manvantaras also turns out to be true. And the Ayurveda is effective medicine that describes the plant-based medicines, and that's even practiced even at the present times, and that's also true. And then Indian history is also, when you look at take the Indian history according to the text described in the ancient text, that's also turning out to true. And then when rishis, they say, they're not lying in telling any of these subjects, and whatever they are telling about consciousness, about the mind, about the self, is, has to be true. It also has to be true. So only thing is that we are not doing the research in the direction where they describe this consciousness. If we point all our understanding and research and efforts in the direction where they describe about the self and self-realization and consciousness, then we might easily progress towards understanding the consciousness. So these are all the entities where we need to we need to trust, uh, because astronomy, Kalpa, Manvantara, and Ayurveda, and history, when there is a truth in them, whatever they talked about the consciousness, there has to be truth in that aspect as well. So if we take all the concepts they described and then do the apply to ourselves, then we might progress towards understanding the consciousness and self-awareness and self-realization in times of what like modern scientific standards. So that's what I'm trying to convince, that so these are all related. We need to take them as factual things. Then in that if we take in that direction, we might lead ourselves in understanding the consciousness. So that's what I'm trying to explain in this second talk, even though it's a short. So that's my goal in saying that, like, a lot of subjects what they talked about are interlinked, and we need to take them as uh, there is a truth in them, and then do the research in their direction, and we might end up in understanding the consciousness, At the same time, as a byproduct, we might establish a continuity in Indian history. In the same way, if we establish the Indian history, continuity in Indian history first, and then we will have a confidence that whatever they talked about, the consciousness is also be possibly true, and then we might put our efforts in understanding that one. So vice versa, any one of them might lead our understanding to the other. So that's my talk. Thank you for listening, and these are my links and where you could find additional information about my work. Thank you for watching.